Right, good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, boys and girls. My name is Mr. Mpam. I'm a subject advisor for mathematics. Today we are going to look at patterns. Remember, we have sequencing series as well as patterns. But for patterns, of course, you're going to concentrate mainly of the work that we did in grade 11. Right, now, of course, the pattern that we're going to talk about here is a quadratic pattern. But boys and girls, remember now it's very important to be able to identify the pattern that you are working with. You remember that most of the time in the question they will say determine the next term or the next two terms. That's when now you'll be able to realize that is this pattern the quadratic pattern, is this pattern the sequence, is this pattern the arithmetic or geometric. It's very, very important. But the question now will be, how do I identify this pattern? Of course, we're going to look at that now, and then immediately after this one now, you'll be able now to say, okay, now I know the quadratic patterns, I must look at the following. Of course, let us now start with the quadratic pattern. Of course, we know that quadratic pattern, of course, we have what? We have Tn is equals to an squared plus bn plus c. Right. Of course, this is the general term for the what? This is the general term for the quadratic pattern. Of course, remember now, most of the time you will be given the sequence, you'll be given the pattern. Of course, now what is it that you need to do now to identify if the pattern is quadratic or geometric? Of course, what's important here is you must say now, of course, this pattern here, we must look at what? You must look at the second, of course, you must look at the second difference. You must look at the second difference there. It's very, very important. Second difference there is very, very important in these patterns. Of course, remember now in the sequence like A plus B plus C, of course, you did this one here you did this one when? Can you remember when you did this one? Of course, you did this one in grade 11, where you have 2A plus C, as well as what? As well as 9A plus 3B, then plus C. Of course, you can continue with the pattern. Right, immediately after this one, we'll have the first difference. Of course, the first difference, that is 4A. Of course, you get 3A plus B. And also this side, you have what? You have 5A plus B. Right, it will continue. But remember now, if we say this pattern here is a linear pattern or arithmetic pattern, arithmetic sequence, the first difference must be what? The first difference must be the same. But when I look at this one here, the first difference is not the same. Therefore, now we need to determine now the second difference. Of course, you'll see that the second difference there, it is of course what? It is of course 2. It is of course 2A. That is why now we say if the second difference is the same, if the second difference is the same, therefore now we'll take this pattern as what? We'll take this pattern as what? As a quadratic pattern. Of course, boys and girls, you must remember now, when you solve the pattern, of course, you'll agree with me that you must be able to identify the next two terms. You must be able to identify the next two terms or the next term of that sequence or of that pattern is very important. Of course, the second one, you must be able to determine the general term. You must be able to determine the general term. It's very, very important to determine the general term. Now, the question will be, how do you determine the general term? Of course, for quadratic pattern, you need, now you know there are many ways to find the general term, especially in this one, but most of the time, you remember now, we take the second difference here. Of course, you also take what? We also take the first term of the first difference, as well as the what? As well as the first term. This is the first term. This is the first term. This is the first difference. This is our first difference. Of course, this is our second This is our second difference. The three first term there, very, very important. Of course, what is the general term here? Like I indicated earlier on, the general term for quadratic pattern there is Tn is equals to an squared plus bn plus c, right? Of course, the third questions that you must be able to know now is to determine what? Is to determine the specific term. You must be able now to determine the specific The specific term is very important. Here we are referring to the question will be saying now, determine the 20th term, determine the 15th term. Now it means we are now specific to say what is a term in position 20, what is a term in position 15. That's when now you are going now to do what? You take that 20, now you substitute it in place of n, now you do the calculations, then you'll have the answer for that is specific term. Of course, the last one now, you must be able to determine now the what? The position. That is the last question that you must be able to do now. The next two terms, of course, they can say next term or next two terms. Why this one is so important? So that at least we can now be able to identify the pattern. It's very important. And the general term, of course, you identify if it's a quadratic, then that is an squared plus bn plus c, and now the specific term as well as the position. Boys and girls, I just wanted us to remind ourselves about the quadratic pattern before now we can now look at what? Before now we can now look at the past paper. Of course, you remember also, we also have the linear pattern, of course, a plus n minus 1 multiplied by d. Of course, this one is a linear or arithmetic pattern. Now, how do I identify this one? Of course, like we said, that here, the first difference here must be the same. That's when now you will be saying now, the difference here is equals to term 2 minus term 1. Once the difference is the same, therefore now you can now be able to identify the first term as well as what? As well as the difference. Good. Now, immediately after this one, then we have now Tn is equals to AR to the power of n minus 1. Of course, tomorrow morning now you'll be looking at the arithmetic as well as geometric sequence. Right. Boys and girls, now let us now focus now on the quadratic pattern. What is it that's important here? Of course, quadratic pattern, the second difference must be the same. And of course, from the quadratic pattern, we must be able to identify the next two terms, the general term, the specific, as well as the position. Of course, now, boys and girls, let us now look at the past paper now to see what is it that now we can do now to apply what we have just reminded ourselves about. Right now, this one is November 2008. So November 2008. Now, boys and girls, now the question here says, consider the sequence. Here is a sequence 8, 18, 30, as well as 44. Now, 2.2.1 says, write down the next two terms of the sequence if the pattern continue in the same way. Write down the next two terms of the sequence if the pattern continue in the same way. Right, boys and girls, of course, you agree with me that this question here, it will be easy for you to solve this one. Remember now I said that is the first one that we need. We must be able to identify what type of the sequence is this one. Is it a quadratic, is it arithmetic, or is it geometric? Now, you are given now, that is 2.2.1, you are given now 8, 18, 30, as well as what? As well as 40, 44. Of course, we need to have first difference first. We need to have the first difference. If first difference is the same, now we know that we are going to have the linear. But if it's not the same, now we look at the second difference. If the second difference is the same, then it's a quadratic. But if it's not the same, now we must look at what? At a constant ratio. Of course, that one will be very important now because it will take us now to what? To the geometric sequence. Of course, remember we take term 2, which is 18 minus 8. The answer there is what? The answer there is 10. And now we take 30 minus 18. 30 minus 18 there, of course, is what? 30 minus 18, that is 12. And of course, 30 minus 18 is 12. And now we have 44 minus 30. Of course, the answer there is what? The answer there is, it's 14. Of course, you can see now the second difference now will be what? Of course, 12 is 2, and now 12 minus 14 also what? Also 2. Right, of course, now if I need the next two terms, we agree this one here must be 16. Why? Because we need to take 14 plus 2 is a 16. Now we say 44 plus 16. 44 plus 16, of course, the answer then will be what? Will be 60. The answer there will be 60. Of course, we need another one here as well, which is 2. Then this one will take us to 18. And now 60 plus 18, then we'll say that is what? That is 78. It means now when we answer this question now, those two terms that we must find here, that will be what? That will be 60 and 78. That is 60 and 78. You know, it is easy when you have the first difference as well as the second difference, because of course I know from here that is 8 plus 10 is 18. And now to go to the next, that is 18 plus 10 plus 2. Of course, it will give me what? It will give me 30. Why? 10 plus 2 is 12. Now 18 plus 12, that is what? That is 30. Boys and girls, it is easy to read this one. 8 plus 18, of course, you agree. The difference between the two is 10. Now I know now. This one here, the difference between the two, it must be more than this one by 2. Then if this one is 10, this one will be 10 plus 2, which is 12. Now 18 plus 12 will be 30. Now when I move to the next one is 12, it must be more by 2 now. 12 plus 2 is 14. Now 14 plus 13, now it will give us what? 44. Right. Once now you can be able to have the first difference as well as the second difference, now it will be easy for you now to determine the next two terms. Of course, that was the first question. Remember, I said now the next two terms is very important. Immediately from here, now I can tell you that this one is a what? This is the quadratic. This is the quadratic pattern. Good. Now let us look at 2.2. 2.2 now says you must calculate n. You must calculate the nth term of the sequence. It's very important, the nth term of the sequence. How do we calculate the nth term of the sequence? Now, if I have to remember now at the end of the day, we must have Tn is equals to an squared plus bn plus c. Now, it means what is important now is that we must have the value of a, the value of b, as well as the value of c. Now the question then will be, how do we determine the value of a, the value of b, as well as the value of c? You will remember from this one I said when we determine the general term, the nth term of the sequence, then we need the second difference. What is the second difference? That is 2a. We also need 3a plus b. What is this 3a plus b? Of course, it's a first difference name. It's a first difference. It's the first term of the first difference. That is 3a plus b. And of course, a plus b plus c. That is our what? That is our first term. Of course, now you agree with me that we are going to need now 2a. What is 2a? It is our second difference. Of course, now when you look at the pattern that is given here, this is our first difference. This is our second difference. Now, it means now we take 2a is equals to what? We equate it to 2. 2a there is equals to 2. And of course, from here now we can now be able now to solve for a, to say we divide both sides by 2. Therefore, a is equals to what? Therefore, a is equals to 1. Right. Now, immediately after this one, now we can now say, fine, we know what is the value of a. Now, let us see now if we can have the value of b. Of course, how do we determine b? Remember now we said we have 3a plus b. 3a. What is 3a plus b? 3a plus b is the first term of the first difference, right? It's the first term of the first difference. What is the first term of the first difference? Of course, now we must look at the pattern now to say, okay, this is the pattern, this is the first term, the second, the third, and the fourth. Of course, now immediately after this one, now we have the first difference. Of course, from this first difference, we need the first term of the first difference. What is the first term of the first difference? There it is 10. Of course, now 3a plus b, we equate it to 10. We equate it to 10. Why 10? 10 is our first term of the first difference. Then from here now, we know we have the value of b. What is the value of b there? It's 1. Now we say 3 multiplied by 1 plus b there is equals to 10. Therefore, now we can now say b is equals to what? B is equals to 10 minus 3. B is equals to 10 minus 3. What is 10 minus 3? Then, of course, it is 7. Then it is 7. Now we can now say, now we know what is the value of A, we know what is the value of B. Of course, boys and girls, to find B, remember A is the second difference always 2A. You equate it to the second difference on the pattern. If the second difference is 1, then it means you will have 2A is equals to 1. But in this case, the second difference is 2. That is why we have 2A is equals to 2. Then you simplify, then that is why you have A is equals to 1. Then the other side, now we have 3A plus B. 3A plus B, that is the first term of the first difference. And of course now, you look at the pattern to say, what is the first term of the first difference? Of course, you can see now the first term of the first difference is equals to what? Is equals to 10. That is why I equate 3A plus B with what? With 10. Now, because you know what is the value of A, you just substitute it there to say 3 times 1 plus B is equals to 10. Now, you make B the subject of the formula. Therefore, 10 minus 3 there is equals to 7. Right. Now, you can see now from this general term, now we are left with C. Now, the question now will be, how do I determine the value of C? Of course, we need the first term, which is A plus B plus C. What is A plus B plus C? It is our first term. Now we go to our what? Now you go to our pattern to say, what is the first term here? The first term here is what? It is 8. Now it means we take A plus B plus C, we equate it to what? We equate it to 8. Right, now immediately after that, now we can now say the value of A is 1, the value of B there is 7, and now plus C there is equals to 8. And now immediately after this one, you can say 1 plus 7, it is 8 plus C is equals to 8. Therefore, now C is equals to 8 minus 8, which is equals to 0. Now you can see now you have the value of A, you have the value of B, as well as the value of C. Right. Now immediately after this one, now what's important is you must answer the question. The question said, calculate the nth term of the sequence. Now it means when we respond to the question, now we can now say, therefore Tn is equals to n squared, yn squared, A there is 1 plus 7n. Right? What is the value of C? Then C is 0. Therefore, the general term or the nth term is Tn is equals to n squared plus 7n. I think, boys and girls, you have this one right. Of course, it's very important. 2A, 3A plus B, as well as A plus B plus C. These are very, very important here. 2A, 3A plus B, A plus B plus C. That is the second difference, the first term of the first difference, as well as the first term. Very, very important. Right. Thank you, boys and girls. I think now we have addressed the second one. Now let us look at 2.2.3. It now says now, which term of the sequence is 330? Which term of the sequence now is 330? Of course, that is a 4 marks question. Now, let us look at this one. Boys and girls, now look at which term of the sequence. What is it that we are looking for here? Which term? It means now we are looking for what? We are looking for n. Then we agree with me that Tn is given. Therefore, from here, what is it that we are going to do? Because we have what? We have the general term. We are just going to take the general term, then we equate it to 330. Then it means, boys and girls, we are going to say now 2.2.3, we have Tn is equals to n squared plus 7n. Now, immediately from this one, because we know that Tn is 330, you just equate this one to say 330 is equals to n squared plus 7n. And therefore, now 0 here is equals to n squared plus 7n minus 330. Now you can see now we have the quadratic what? We have the quadratic pattern, the quadratic equation. Therefore, 0 is equals to, you can see now if we can now be able to factorize this one here. What are the factors? I believe that you boys and girls, you are looking for the factors as well. The factors of what? The factors of 330. Factors of 330 there. Of course, divide by that is 11. We can also use the quadratic pattern, of course, the quadratic formula You can also look for quadratic formula, the factors there. Then we are going to have x is equals to minus b there, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Of course, it is nice to have the quadratic formula on your calculator. It's very, very nice. Right, let us now see if we can have this one. Of course, you have minus there. What is a b there? It's a 7. Of course, it's a 7. Now, immediately after this one, now we have plus. Then the square root of what? The square root of b squared. What is b? It is a 7 squared, right? 7 squared. 7 squared minus 4 multiplied by 1, then multiply by 330. Now the answer there, it is minus 3, minus, no, can't be like this one. Of course, 330, let me take it this way. Let me take it 330, call sign, shift, then we have factors. Okay, 330, then shift fact. Now, of course, you have now 2 times 3. Let me see which one will work. 2 times 3. The answer is 6. And now 6 times 5. Of course, it will give us 30. And also, let me see if we take 15 as well as 22. 15 times 22 there is 330. 22 minus 15. That is 7. Good. Boys and girls, of course, you know that to find those factors, you need to play around these numbers. That is why it's very important now to go straight to the quadratic formula, right? We have n multiplied by n, that is n squared. Now, the factors of 330, there are many. But what is important is you must look for the one that will give us what? The difference of what? The difference of 7. Why am I saying the difference of 7? Because here we have what? We have minus 330. You remember now, the only time where we have a negative sign is when you take a negative multiply by positive, right? Now, this one here will be 15, and the other one then will be 22. You remember 22 multiplied by 15, it is exactly 330, and also 22 minus 15, then the difference there is it's 7. Now, the question now is which one must be positive? Of course, this one, 22, must be positive, and therefore 15 now it is negative. Therefore, now we can now say n is equals to negative 22, or n is equals to 15. Of course, boys and girls, you cannot just leave your answer like this one, because in that pattern you cannot say our n is a minus 22. Therefore, you must indicate, therefore, n is equals to what? N is equals to 15. It's very, very important. Boys and girls, these are the 3 questions that we are referring to now under the quadratic pattern. Remember, I said to look for the next 2 terms. Of course, the general term is very important. The only one that we don't have it here is a specific term, but the position for this one, which term, or show that this term is in the sequence, then in this one now, they want to determine what? To determine the position. Of course, boys and girls, I believe now, this question now, you have it right. At least now, I've reminded you about the quadratic pattern, of course, that you did now in grade 11. Of course, now let us take now another example now under the quadratic to see if really you have this one right. Of course, boys and girls, the first problem that we are going to have here now is that February 2010, question 2. It says now, consider the following sequence. We have the sequence now. The sequence now is 399, 360, 323, 288, as well as 255, 224. Right, now, of course, the first question now, they said, of course, you determine the nth term, which is Tn, in terms of n. Now, what is this one here? What is it that you are looking for here? Now, you must determine the general term. What is the general term? Of course, the first thing that you need to do is to identify what type of the sequence is this one, because we are not told if the sequence is quadratic, or the sequence is arithmetic or exponential or what? Or geometric. Now, first of all, you need to identify what type of the sequence is this one. Boys and girls, now this is a 6 marks question. Of course, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to go through the question. Then immediately after that, now we are going to discuss this question. Now remember, at the end of the day, your answer must be Tn is equals to an squared plus bn plus c. All right, thank you, boys and girls. Let us see what you are having. Remember, time is very, very important. If you have that paper for 3 hours, make sure that you look at the marks. 1 mark question, you cannot spend 20 minutes on that question. If you do that, then you are not going to finish the paper. You're not going to attempt a lot of questions there. Right now, 2.1, they are saying determine the nth term, Tn, in terms of n. Where do we start first? We must identify the pattern. Now, we have the sequence here, 399, we have 360, we have 323, as well as 288, and 255, as well as 220, 224. Right, boys and girls, now we can have the first difference. Of course, 399 minus 360. The answer there is what? The answer is 39. Now look for the second one. That is 323 minus 360. Of course, that is a minus 37. Okay, 399 minus 360. And now 360 minus 399. Of course, is a minus 39, minus 37. And now the other one is 288 minus 323. Then the answer is minus 30, minus 35. Right, 255 minus 288. Then we have minus 30, minus 33. And of course, now the last one is 224 minus 255. Now we have minus 31. You can see now this, our first difference there, it is decreasing. It is decreasing. Right. Now, immediately now from this one, because now 39, 37, 35, 33, I can see now this one is not the same. Therefore, the sequence is not arithmetic or it's not the linear. But let us see if we can have the same second difference. Right. We have minus 37 plus 39. Then the answer there is 2, right? Of course, that is 2. And you do the same, minus 35 plus 37. Now you have 2. Now the question then will be y plus. Remember, that is minus 33 minus minus 35. It will be negative times negative. It's a plus. Therefore, now we have 2. We have 2 there. Now, immediately now I can see now the second difference is what? The second difference now is it is the same. Now, what is the meaning of this one here? This sequence now is a what? It's a quadratic sequence, right? What do you know about the quadratic? Of course, we know that when you determine the general term, of course, we need 2a. What is 2a? 2a is our second difference. What is the second difference in this sequence? That is 2. Then divide by 2, divide by 2. Therefore, now a is equals to 1. Are you happy with this one? Yes, I can see the smile that we have A, right? Now, let us see now if we can have B now. Now, for B, we have 3A plus B is equals to what? What is 3A plus B? Yes, I can see now. You say 3A plus B is our first term of the first difference. Here, our first term of the first difference now is a minus what? It's a minus 39. Then, of course, because we know the value of A, we just say 3 times 1 plus B there is equals to minus 30, minus 39. Therefore, B is equals to what? Minus 39, of course, minus 3. What is the answer there? The answer there will be minus 42. Therefore, now we know the value of A as well as the value of B. Right. Now, the next one, of course, is to find the value of C. How do you determine C? That is A plus B plus C. What is A plus B plus C? It is the first term. What is our first term here? 390, 399. Do you know the value of A? Yes, A is 1, B minus 42, then plus C is 399. Right now, what is the difference now? Therefore, now C is equals to 399. 1 minus 42. 1 minus 42, of course, will be what? Will be 41. Then it means we add 41 on this side. Now we say we have 399 plus 41. Then the answer there is what? The answer there is 440. Boys and girls, look at this smile now. I can see now you are happy with the value of A, with the value of B, as well as the value of C. Very, very important. Now we can now end this to say now the final answer here is therefore Tn is equals to what? Tn is equals to n squared minus 42n plus what? Plus 440. N squared minus 42n plus 440. That is 2.1. The nth term Tn of the sequence in terms of what? In terms of n. Very, very important. Right. Now I believe now we can now go to the second question. We are happy with 2.1, right? Yes, I can see now you are happy with 2.1. Right. What about 2.2? 2.2 now says you must determine which term or terms has a value of 0. Determine which term or terms have a value of 0. Boys and girls, I just want to see what will be your answer on this question. It's very, very important. I just want to see, are you going to find a specific term or the position here? I don't know. 3 minutes, boys and girls, because now three marks for this one. Then immediately after the 3 minutes, we are going to discuss the question to see. I just want to see what is your final answer here. I just want to see what is your final answer here. Then immediately after that, now we can discuss the question. 3 minutes, start now. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, boys and girls. Let us now look at 2.2. Determine which term has a value of 0, or determine which terms has a value of 0. Boys and girls, I want to see your answer there. I want to see your answer. I don't know what is it that you can do to show me your answer. It's very, very important. Right. Boys and girls, what is the first step? What is the first step? Of course, now I can see, look at the question itself. Determine which term. Then immediately I can tell you here, I'm looking for the position now. For that position to say n here, it is in 20. Therefore, if n is 20 now, it means that one then will make the value of what? The value of Tn to be what? To be 0. Boys and girls, we are going to take Tn is equals to n squared minus 42n plus 44 plus 440 there. What is it that you're going to do? Now we substitute Tn with 0. Now we have n squared minus 42n plus 440. Right, boys and girls, the next step here now is to do what? We now factorize this one here. Of course, remember I said in this case, because you have big numbers here, you can use the quadratic formula, of course, it's right. Now let me have the quadratic formula, that is a minus. Of course, the value of b there is a minus 42. Now plus the square root, of course. What is that one? Minus 42. Then we square it, minus 4 times 1, right? Multiply by 440. Then we divide this by what? By 2, multiply by 1. That is a quadratic formula. Then, of course, I can see now the first one there is n is equals to 22. If n is equals to 22, then I know, remember n is 22. Then what I can do here is to say, right, now let me make the right-hand side to be 0. Then n is positive 22. Then on the other side, then it will be what? Minus 22 is equals to 0. Then immediately from this one, now I can now say, okay, my first factor there is what? It's n minus 20, n minus 22. Now I look for the second one. Of course, you must change the sign there. That is minus here, minus 42. Then plus the square root. Of course, minus 42 all squared minus 4 multiplied by 1 multiplied by 440. Then divide by 2 times 1. Then you can see that is 22. Now, let us now change the sign there to have the other one. Remember, we started with the positive. Now, let us see if we have a minus, what's going to happen. Then it says 20. What is the meaning of this one here? N is equals to 20. Now, we take 20 on the other side. That is n minus 20 is equals to 0. Then my second one there is n minus 20. Now, boys and girls, when you take 20 times 22, of course, you get 400 and what? 440. But the question is, do I get the middle term? Of course, the first one, n times n is n squared. 440 should be 22 times 20. Of course, negative times negative, it's a positive. But what is important is, do you get the middle term? Of course, middle term 22 plus 20. Then the answer is 42. Yes, the middle term then is 42. Then it means my factors here are correct. Therefore, n is equals to 22 or n is equals to 20. Therefore, from here, boys and girls, now we can make a conclusion to say both terms name. Both terms, what are those terms? 22, n is equals to 22, and n is equals to 20. Will have the value of what? Will have the value of 0. Will have the value of 0. Right, boys and girls, that was what? That was 2.2. Determine which term has the value of what? Has the value of 0. Right, boys and girls, now, of course, now I can see now you are happy. Now you are able to determine the general what? The general term, and also now you can now be able to identify the question, the one that says you must determine the position, and the one that says you must determine the specific term. Right, let us now add something on this one to see if now we'll be able to look at this one here. Okay, the first question here is, okay, the sequence is 4, it's 9, it's x, is 37. This sequence is a quadratic. Yo, I'm happy now. Why am I so happy? Because they told me that this sequence is what? The sequence is, it's a quadratic sequence. What do I know if this one is a quadratic? The quadratic, the second difference is what? The second difference is the same. It's very important. And now immediately after that one, of course, to determine the general term, I know what is it that I must do. Right now, boys and girls, let us look at the first question. It says you must calculate x. The first question says you must calculate x. What is it that you're going to do here? What is it that you're going to do? Very, very important. Of course, boys and girls, like I said, this step here is very, very important. You know, to know that the sequence is a quadratic, it is very, very important because it is going to make our work very, very easy. Why? Because quadratic, the second difference is the same. Then it means you'll agree with me that to say we need to take the sequence 4, 9, x, 37. Right? We have term 1, term 2, term 3, term 4. What is it that you're going to do here? We determined the first difference. You know, when you determine the first difference, you take 9 minus 4. What is 9 minus 4? Then it's 5. And now from here now, you take x, that will be x minus 9. Yes. Now from here now, we will have 37 minus what? Minus x. Right? That is 9 minus 4 is 5, x minus 9, and 37 minus x. What is this one here? It is the first difference name. But now we need to go to the second difference. Why? Because we know that the sequence is quadratic. Right now, how do we determine the second difference? Of course, we take x minus 9, then we minus 5 from it, and immediately you do the same. That is x minus 9 minus 5, and also on this side, we take x minus 9. We take 37 minus x, then we subtract from it what? X minus 9. Can you see that one? That is 37 minus x minus into x minus 9. Of course, now, look at the second difference. We have x minus 9 minus 5 and also 37 minus x minus into x minus 9. Why do I put this inside the brackets? Very important, boys and girls, because now we have two terms here. Now, it means these two terms, we must do what? We must multiply them with the negative sign. Of course, boys and girls, now can we stop here? Yes, but what is it that we're going to do from here? Because we know for quadratic, the second difference is the same. Therefore, now we're going to equate the two. X minus 9 minus 5, we say it is equals to what? 37 minus x minus now x minus 9. Then immediately from here now, we can now say we solve for x to say, what is this one here? That is x minus 9 minus 5. Of course, it is minus what? It is minus 14 is equals to 37 minus x. Negative times positive is a negative x. Negative times positive there. Negative times negative will be positive 9. Of course, now we collect like terms. Minus x, it's a minus 2x. 37 plus 9, of course, will be what? Will be 46. That is a positive 46. It's x minus 14. Then from here, we have the linear equation. How do I solve the linear equation? Unknown one side, numbers on the other side. Therefore, the unknown there, that will be x. We have minus 2x here. Now it becomes positive 2x is equals to 46. Now it's a negative 14. Now it's going to be what? A positive 14. Now this one is 3x is equals to, right, 46 plus 14, that is 16. Now immediately from here now, divide by 3. Therefore, x now is equals to what? X now is equals to 20. Now I can see now I have the value of x which is equals to 20. Boys and girls, now it is of course very important to make sure that you understand this one. Of course, I've seen now the first two. It is easy now to find what? To find the general term. But this one now, you are seeing now, you must find the value of x. Also now you must do the same. Make sure that you master the part where you determine the value of x or the value of y. Right. Now 3.2. It says hence or otherwise now you determine the nth term of the sequence. Hence or otherwise you determine the nth term of the sequence. Boys and girls, I think now this one here, it will take us to the break, so that at least immediately after the break, then now we can start discussing this problem here to see what is your general term. Remember, you must have an squared plus bn plus c. This was a 7 marks questions. Now let us start now with 3.2. Then we'll discuss 3.2 immediately after the break. Remember, you're going to have 10 minutes break. Thank you, boys and girls. Welcome back. Remember, we were busy now with 3.1. Now we said that the value of x there is 20, right? Now let us look at 3.2. It says hence or otherwise determine the nth term of the sequence. Boys and girls, now you will agree with me to say if the question says determine the nth term, then it means our answer then must be what? Our answer then at the end of the day, we must have Tn is equals to an squared plus bn plus c. Why this one? Because this is the quadratic pattern. Good. Now, boys and girls, now we have 4, we have 9. What is the value of x? Is 20 there, as well as 30, as well as 37. Right, from this one, boys and girls, we need to have what? We need to have the first difference. Of course, the first difference there will be 9 minus 4. Of course, it's 5. And now we need 20 minus 9. of course it is 11, and then 37 minus 20, of course that is what? That is 17. Right, now from here now you said, okay, what is 11 minus 5? Then 11 minus 5 to be sure there, that is 6. And also 17 minus 11, it is also 6. Right, boys and girls, now you can see now you have the second difference, which is 6. And this one here is a constant second difference, 6, 6. It must be the same. So for us to say we have the quadratic pattern. Boys and girls, one said, now, Tatino, why are you taking so long? Of course, one I know you wanted to say now, if you have x minus 9 minus 5, then you can say this is our second difference. Now, you see now the difference then will be 20 minus 9 minus 5. Now we can check now what is 20 minus 9 minus 5. Of course, it is 6. You see, as long as you understand what you are doing, it is very important. You are going to get this right, right? You are going to get it right. Now, boys and girls, now you have the second difference now, right? What is the next step? Of course, you have 2a equals to 6. You divide by 2 there, divide by 2 there. Therefore, a equals to what? A equals to 3. And from here now, we move now to the next one, right? We move now to the next one to say 3a plus b is equals to 5. Now you say 3 multiplied by 3 there plus b. That is what? That is 5. What is 3 times 3? It is 9. Therefore, b is equals to 5 minus 9, not 6, right? It's not 3 times 2. 3 times 3, that is 9. Of course, 5 minus 9, of course, it is what? It is minus 4. Then, boys and girls, now you know now we are left with what? With c. How do we determine c? It is a plus b plus c. What is a plus b plus c? A plus b plus c, of course, it is the first term, which is equals to 4. Then we have 3 there, minus 4. Then plus c is equals to 4. Therefore, now we can now say, therefore, c is equals to what? C is equals to 4 plus 4 minus 3. And therefore, the answer there is what? The answer there is 5, because 4 plus 4 is 8. Now 8 minus 3, then that is 5. Therefore, boys and girls, the final answer there, you can see now that is Tn is equals to 3n squared minus 4n plus what? Plus 5. That is the answer for 3.2. Hence or otherwise determine the nth term of the sequence. That is why now we have 3n squared minus 4n plus 5. Boys and girls, make sure that you practice this type of questions, because really, to be honest with you, you don't know what will be in that paper. Don't only concentrate on what? On determining the general term and also the next two terms, as well as the specific and what? And the position. Make sure that you understand to find the value of x as well. Right, now we have another question here. That is question 4. Boys and girls, now they are saying here a quadratic pattern has a second term equals to 1, a third term equals to minus 6, and the fifth term is equals to minus 14. Now I'm interested in 4.1. You must calculate the second difference of this quadratic pattern. I'm happy now we are also told that this is what? This is a quadratic pattern. Now you know what is it that you need for you to determine the general term, and what is it that is important with regard to what? With regard to a quadratic pattern. Boys and girls, I believe that you are going to enjoy this question. Then immediately after this one, then we will be now looking at 4.2. That's a 5 marks question, boys and girls. Let us give it 4 minutes. Then immediately after 4 minutes, then you are going to discuss it together to see if what I have and what you have will be the same. Right, thank you, boys and girls. Let me see what is it that you have. Of course, I can see that most of you are asking yourself, is this correct? Now, let us see if you are right or wrong. 4.1, 4.1 there, calculate the second difference of this quadratic. Where do we start, boys and girls? Of course, let us look at the pattern. They are saying now a quadratic pattern has a second term equals to 1. Then it means we don't know what is the value of the first term. We don't know what is the value of the first term, but the second term there is 1. The second term is 1. Then we have the third term as well. The third term is a minus 6. And then what is the fourth term? We don't know the value of the fourth term, but we have the fifth term is equals to what? The fifth term is equals to minus 14. Right, immediately from here now, boys and girls, you can see now, I don't know what is the value of the first term, that is the unknown there, and also I don't know what is the value of the fourth term. It is also there, the unknown. Very, very important. Of course, not always x as well as y. Of course, you can say a and b, you can say w and x. Now you decide which variables you want to use. Right, now immediately from here, because boys and girls, I'm told that this is a quadratic pattern, then it means now I must find the second difference from this pattern as well. Then it means now, if I can get to the second difference, then I'll be happy. Why? Because I know I can equate the two, because the second difference, it is always the same. Right, now, let us have the first difference, that is a 1 minus x. I'm happy about this one. And the next one, of course, that will be minus 6 minus 1. That is a minus 7. And the other one here will be what? Of course, that is a y minus 6. That will be y plus 6. Is that correct? Yes, because that is y minus 6. Negative times negative, it's a positive. And the other one now will be what? The other one now will be minus 14 minus y. Right, now, we have the first difference. Of course, we are not going to leave it there. Why? Because we know that this is a quadratic. We must have the second difference, right? Now, let us look at the second difference. Of course, that is a minus 7 minus 1 minus x. Good. And now we move from here. Now we have y plus 6 minus 7. Of course, it will be plus 7. And then the other one now that we have, of course, it's a minus 14 minus y minus what? Minus y plus 6. Let us see if we have it right. Of course, that is a minus 7 minus 1 minus x. Good, inside the brackets. And we also have y plus 6 minus 7. Negative times negative will be positive. And now we move now to the next. Minus 14 minus 7, of course, is y plus 6. Of course, 100% correct. Right. Boys and girls, now we are at the second difference now. I'm happy now about this one. But now the question is, what is it that you are going to do from here? Boys and girls, we said that quadratic pattern, the second difference is the same. Is that correct? Yes, now it means now we're going to take it from here. It's very important, boys and girls, because I want to know what is the second difference. Now, I cannot take the 2. Why? Because if I take the first 2, then it means I will have 2 unknowns, right? I will have x as well as y as the unknown. But now, what I can do now, I can take the last 2, whereby now I can now say y plus 6 plus 7 is equals to minus 14 minus y minus into y plus 6. I equate the two. Y, the second difference is the same. Therefore, we've got 2 or 3. It will depend on the value that you have as your second difference. Right. Now we simplify. That is y plus what? Y plus 13. 6 plus 7. 13 is equals to minus 14 minus y minus 6, right? Now, when you simplify this side, negative y minus y, it is minus 2, is a minus 2y. Now, minus 14 minus 6, of course, it is what? Minus 20. Right, now we can now say, okay, this one is still y plus 13. Unknown one side is very important. You can see we have the equation everywhere. We have the equation everywhere. That is why if you struggle with the algebra, then you're going to have a problem, you know, when you solve the problem here in question 2 or question 4. It will depend on that question and the number pattern as well. Right, now it means now we can now collect the unknown to one side. That is 1 plus 2y is equals to what? Minus 20 minus 13. Then from here now we say when I add the 2, now, 20 plus 13, of course, we get what? 33. But of course, the sign is negative. Y plus 2y, then that is 3y. Then immediately after this one, divide by 3. Therefore, I can now say y is equals to what? Y is equals to negative 11. Boys and girls, can you see? Do you have y as a negative 11? Yes, I can see the smile there. The value of y is negative 11. It means you are doing good, boys and girls. It's very encouraging to see that some of these questions really, you are getting them right. But now, let us answer the question now. We don't calculate the value of y. What is important here is we must see what is the value of the second difference, right? Now, then from here now, remember, y plus 6 represented the second difference, minus 14 minus y, and everything on this side, the second difference, as well as this one on the other side. Then it means now I can now say, okay, the second difference now is equals to what? Is equals to the y, which is minus 11, then plus 6 plus 7. Of course, 6 plus 7 is what? It's 13. Minus 11, now I can see now the second difference there is positive 2. Boys and girls, it doesn't matter which one you take, especially here, the last two. Even if you take what? Minus 14 minus y minus 6. Of course, you remember when you simplify this one, you had minus 2y as well as minus what? Minus 20. Now you substitute to say minus 2. Y is minus 11 there. Then, of course, minus 20. Minus times minus is a positive, therefore you have 22 minus 20. Look, the answer there is still what? The answer there is still 2. Therefore, you need to take one of the two. One of the two. Why one of the two? The second difference must be the same. Right. Boys and girls, I believe that you have this question right. Now, 4.2 now says, hence or otherwise, calculate the first term of the pattern. Remember, we don't have the first term of the pattern. Now, how are you going to calculate the first term of the pattern? Boys and girls, 2 minutes. I want to see what is the value of the x. What is the value of x? All right, thank you, boys and girls. Let us see what is the value of the first term. Of course, you will remember now from this one we said let the first term be x. And of course, you have x, 1 minus 6, y. Now we know y is a minus 11, as well as what? As well as minus 14. Right, now the question here is we must now determine the value of what? The value of x, right? Boys and girls, of course, now to make this easier, because also it's a 2 marks, remember now we must make sure that we save time. We must make sure that we save time here. Right, 4.2 here, now we're going to say now, we take minus 7 minus 1 minus x, we equate it to 2. Why do we equate this one to 2? It's very important. Now, minus 7 minus 1 minus into 1 minus x, it is our second difference. Now, this one here, it must give us what? It must give us positive 2. Therefore, now we simplify to have minus 7 minus 1 minus x is equals to 2. Therefore, now x is equals to, here we have what? Minus 7 minus 1. Of course, it is minus 8. Now we subtract 2 from it. Therefore, x is equals to 10. Then, of course, now you can see now the value of x here is what? The value of x here will be 10. And the value will be minus what? Minus 10. And also the value of this one here will also be what? Will also be minus 11. Right, boys and girls, of course, it's very important. Make sure that at the end of the day, you check what you have written down if it is correct, because at the end of the day, you are not writing for the sake of writing. You write because you want to do what? You write because you want to pass. It is very, very important. Right, now, boys and girls, now I believe now you now understand this one. Remember, now we did 2 problems where we have 1 unknown. Now, in this one, you can see now we had how many unknown? We had 2 unknown. Please make sure that you practice this type of questions. Very, very important, so that when we get to that paper, then you know what to do. I know now we don't have enough time, but I want us to look at this one quickly to make sure that at the end of the day, when we leave, we have covered, I think, almost everything under quadratic pattern. Right, let us look at the question. The following sequence of numbers forms a quadratic sequence. The following sequence of numbers forms a quadratic sequence. I'm happy also. Why? Because you are told that This is the quadratic sequence or quadratic pattern. Look at 4.1. The first difference of the above sequence also form a sequence. Yes, we know about that. Now determine an expression for the general term of the first difference. Now we must determine the general term for what? For the first difference. Now, what is it that we're going to do here? Of course, boys and girls, let me give you 2 minutes to go through this question. Then we're going to discuss this with you. Please make sure that immediately after 2 minutes, you are done with this one. Right, boys and girls, let us look at 4.1. Right, of course, we have the pattern, the sequence -3, -2, -3, -6, -11, right? Of course, let us see if we can have the first difference, -2, minus, of course, that will be what? That will be +1, -3, minus this one, of course, it will be -1. Yes, it will be -1, and then -6, minus, it will be what? -3, of course, because negative times negative will be positive, -11, then of course, -11 plus 6, of course, it will be what? It will be -5, right? Of course, boys and girls, this is our first difference. Now let us see now if we can have the second difference now. Then the second difference here is what? -1, -1 here. Of course, it's a -2, -3, -1 here. Negative times negative is positive. Therefore, we are going to have what? We are going to have -2, then we have -2. Now, what is it that we must do? We must now determine the general term for this pattern here. Of course, when you look at the pattern now, of course, this pattern or this sequence is what? Is arithmetic. Why arithmetic? Because the first difference is the same. Therefore, the formula that you must use there is Tn is equals to A plus n minus 1 multiplied by D, whereby the first term there, the first term is 1 plus, of course, we are looking for the difference which is -2. Therefore, we have a 1 minus 2n plus 2. Then, of course, you have -2n plus what? Plus 3. Therefore, the general term here you will see now is what? Is -2n plus 3. Of course, boys and girls, the question is, why do we take this one? Of course, you need to have the difference. Once you have the difference now, you'll be able to use the formula. Right? One also, remember, we still have Tn is equals to Bn plus what? Plus C. You can also use the formula, but I think this one is the easiest one to use. Of course, now they said 4.2 here. You calculated the first difference between the 35 and 36 terms of the quadratic sequence. Of course, you only need to do what? You only need to determine the difference between the two terms. Now, let us go back to this one, boys and girls. Remember now, 1 is the difference between what? 1 is the difference between -3 as well as -2, and -1 difference between the two. Then it means to get 1, we only take what? We only take -2 plus 3, then it will give us this one. Then it means for you to determine the difference between the two, you only need to use what? You only use to say T36 here is equals to what? Is equals to -2 multiplied by 36, and of course plus what? Plus 3. Then you'll have the answer there, -2 times 36, of course here, and then plus 3. Then of course now you will have what? You will have -69. That will be the answer. Boys and girls, please make sure that you go through this type of questions to make sure that you really understand. Of course, the next question now they are saying now you determine now the expression for the nth term, which of course you know that because it's a quadratic, it should be what? It should be Tn is equals to an squared plus bn plus C. Right, boys and girls, I believed that you have enjoyed the sessions, and I think you have used this one as an opportunity now to revise and prepare yourself for the final paper. But now, when I check the number of days left before you do what? Before you write the final paper, boys and girls, you don't have enough days, right? For paper 1, it is only what? We have only 7 days, and also for paper 2, we have 10 days left. Make sure that you prepare. Make sure that each and every day you do something. Don't take the whole books or the whole textbook to say, now I'm going to look for all topics in paper 1. No, it's not going to help you. Topic by topic, today's quadratic patterns, then tomorrow it's a sequence in a series. Now you make sure that for whatever that you are doing today, you understand it before the end of today. Good luck with the examinations, boys and girls. We'll meet again.